Hey, you guys. So now that HBO Max, or I guess Max's Love and Death is now complete, I wanted to compare it to Hulu's Candy that came out last year. Both of them involve the same case centered around Candy Montgomery, but I do think they both handle it very differently. I think it really how they wanted to tell the story, how they wanted to shape the people involved, that really plays a central part in regards to, I think, how people want to watch and which one would they enjoy more than the other, because that is something I do think with some of these actor portrayal of these true crime events. You can go down so many different avenues, but some may hit more than others. And I think it really depends on which one is best for you. So the one thing I noticed that I think is a big thing is how it is structured. What were they kind of going for here? And I'll explain that, okay? In Candy, it seems more like a psychological thriller sort of situation, because you have this setup for how the story is told. It starts right after, the Betty Gorse situation, and then you go from there. If you want other pieces of information, you get these flashbacks or flash forwards depending on what is going on. So are you at a crime scene? Are you talking to a person? What is happening in that particular story that maybe initiates this plot point to where we get a little bit more. And I think that fleshes out Candy as a character. Personally, from what I have seen, Jessica Biel's portrayal of Candy is more accurate than Elizabeth Olsen's. If you're going based on characterization, she does give off more of a manipulator, kind of sociopathic. She's not as warm. In Love and Death, Elizabeth Olsen, her portrayal of Candy is a little bit more personable. She's a little bit warmer. And I think that's because you have this chronological, piece by piece, step by step timeline as to what happened in this case. I think that also has to do with this Love and Death is 7 episodes, Candy is 5. That is you are able to flesh out more history than Candy did. And so that, I think, plays a major part into it as to giving you more of this shock as to, oh my God, Candy did this? People can't believe. And so you can focus more on this kind of true story aspect because you're getting so much more, it feels like. And so it enhances and updates the story a bit. One thing, though, is with Olsen's portrayal, she does not look like Candy. It's not until essentially once she kind of gets glasses, that's where she looks a little bit more like Candy. So I do not know why they didn't have maybe a permed wig. I cannot say. I think she did a fine job. But it does make you wonder, if you are going for this kind of true story aspect, why not try and go the extra mile then? But you do see this change with other people involved in this case as well. I noticed it a lot with Alan. Pat and even a little bit with Betty. Alan in particular, it seemed in Love and Death, he was a little bit more cheery, like a little bit more bubbly to me, while in Candy, he just felt a little bit more reserved. And so with the relationship that it came with Candy, I felt more chemistry in Love and Death between those two people than I did in Candy. And I know there's a big conversation in regards to intimacy scenes. Even if you like take that out, when they are just having their conversations, when they are like, I wouldn't say just getting to know each other, it's just kind of there. I didn't feel that in Candy. I didn't get too much of that. It didn't feel passionate to me like it did in Love and Death. Now, Pat Montgomery is portrayed in Love and Death, I feel, as not attentive. There's one scene where Candy, I think she's taking like a short story, poetry kind of class, essentially like an English class for her writing, and she wants Pat to read some of it, and he really does not want to. He kind of just wants to do his thing and doesn't really, I wouldn't say care, but just isn't super into it. While in Candy, he is very attentive. He is kind of there for her the whole time. He is present. And so I think with just how the people are portrayed, it can play a lot into how do these events connect? How do they start? Because even with Betty, I felt in Candy, you get more, she was insecure in Love and Death, but she felt more like shy insecure. While in Love and Death, she was a lot more like blunt, in some cases, like, I wouldn't say confident, but she was not afraid to kind of say how she felt at times. While in some scenes with Betty watching, in Candy, it just felt like almost at times she was uncomfortable. She didn't know really where she belonged. And so I thought a lot of these kind of, I guess you could say, personality characteristics, they just felt very different. They changed. I thought it was interesting too. One thing I noticed in Candy, they mentioned the Gores had a foster child, and in Love and Death, they didn't talk about that at all. So I don't know if they just didn't want to include that or whatnot. And even though the Montgomerys and the Gores, this whole case, I wouldn't say it revolves around a church. I don't want it to make it seem like that. But Love and Death definitely has more of a church setting, has more talks in regards to the church than Candy does. And so I don't know if that's, again, to give a deeper look into the character as to what's going on, because you see in both of these cases they do, Candy does have a connection to the church, but you just see more of the setting and everything within Love and Death than you do in Candy. So I don't know if that's just to kind of flesh out this more personable side, to give it more, I guess you could say, humanization or whatnot. Personally, if I had to say between the two, which one I enjoyed more, Love and Death kind of had my attention more. just because I am somebody who likes a more chronological, like, I wouldn't say step by step, but here's a timeline of events. This is what happened. I do think the acting is just very good. You do have a very strong ensemble in here. Not saying that Candy doesn't either, but you have a lot of big names in Love and Death. And you've got some, again, you've got some in Candy. Both are very good. I think the approach is, of course, just very different. It very much, I think, depends on what are you watching it for. Love and Death is supposed to be like, yes, this is based on a true story, actor portrayal of everything that happened. While Candy, that too is based on a true story, but it gives you, I don't know, like this extra kind of genre to it. Like I said, kind of this like psychological thriller kind of sprinkled in. So it gives you an extra element that Love and Death may not give you. Love and Death kind of gives you more of that drama than Candy does. So I think it really depends on what are you watching it for, what do you want it for. Again, I'd say the one thing that kind of upsets me after seeing what Candy is supposed to look like is, why doesn't Elizabeth Olsen look more like Candy? Like, why not? But that's just probably a nitpick thing. Aside from that, I think both have their strong suits. It just really depends on which one you want. So those are my thoughts. Those are the differences that I saw. So feel free to check them both out. If you saw one or the other, feel free to leave your thoughts down below, and I will talk to y'all later. Bye.